Hey everyone, it's Miss K here, and welcome to Art with Miss K. I have figured out our audio issues, and I am super excited to get started today. So I'm going to start by showing you how to use colored pencils in an artistic way. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So you should be looking at my document camera right now. It's going to be full screen for you. And so I just have a piece of white paper in front of me, and I also have colored pencils. Now I'm just using basic colors. I would like you to grab basic colors and have them in front of you as well. So by basic, I mean all your primary and all of your secondary colors. So I have red, orange, yellow, green, another green, we'll get into that. So 2 greens, and then I have blue, violet, and black. Okay, you don't have to have black, but some students like to for something we can do at the end. There's a reason I have 2 greens. You want to have like a yellowy green and then a darker green. When you're selecting your colors, you want to pick the colors that remind you the most of when you were in kindergarten and just those really intense, normal, natural colors. So you don't want like a forest green, you want like a secondary green. You don't want a sky blue or like a weird blue color. You want like that primary blue color. So we're just gonna get those basic colors. And once you have all of them out, you can go ahead and take your yellow. I'm going to take my orange to start off just because it's a little easier to see. And I'm going to create a line where I am going to draw my spectrum inside. So your spectrum is just colors going through the color wheel. I'm going to show you how to blend them, show you how to layer them so we can get nice colors. So I like to do squiggles. And so I'm going to do like a giant squiggle all throughout my art piece. And I'm going to have my spectrum be inside here. Okay, so again, I did my outline in orange. You should probably do yours in yellow because yellow is a lighter color and it just like looks nicer to use that yellow. So go ahead and do that. And I always love to start off with red. I think the reason I start off with red is the first letter in the acronym for Roy G. Biv, which is how I learned how the colors go in order. If you weren't familiar, Roy G. Biv is just an acronym that helps us remember the order of the colors on the color wheel. So R for red, O for orange, et cetera, et cetera. So it goes red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, violet, and then violet reconnects back with red. So I always like to start off with red. I would like you to start off with red as well. And think about where you would like to place your red on your spectrum. You can do anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and do probably like right here down at the bottom. Okay, and I want my red to go from like here to like here-ish, okay? So I drew 2 lines of where I want that red to go, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of trace my general shape that I want to have. And I'm going to do 1 layer lightly of my pencil on my paper. Okay, something I want you to note about what I'm doing as I do this is I'm not pressing hard. I also want you to note, I'm actually being a little bit more extreme than I need to be, but I'm holding my pencil all the way up here. It's okay if you're holding it more like here. What I don't want you doing is I don't want you holding your pencil down here and coloring up and down. You should be holding it at least 1 inch up. Again, sometimes I like to rest the edge of this on my hand. And again, that's just how I prefer to color sometimes. Each of you, you're gonna have your own unique way that you like to do things, and that's totally fine. Okay, so I'm doing 1 layer of color. I'm trying to get as much of my paper covered as possible without pressing hard. So I'm just doing a light, again, 1 layer of my color. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I fill in that entire space, that section. Okay, so I've done 1 layer of color. When you get to this point, this is where I like to rotate my paper just so we can get rid of some of those lines. So I always rotate my paper in 90 degrees. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do a 2nd layer, and I'm just gonna move in a little bit. So these edges where I have just a little bit of red, I'm not gonna do a 2nd layer of red there, okay? So I'm gonna do another light layer in the opposite direction. Again, I'm ignoring this area right here. So light layers. Okay, I'm not gonna do this area right here. I'm just going over. Okay, then you keep doing the same process. So now I'm gonna rotate my paper again. Add an additional layer, but don't go as far for this one. And we're just going to be continuing that process. So I'm noticing right now, I actually have some like eraser crumblies on my desk and on my underneath my paper. And so if you can see this like dark spot right there, that happened just because I had like an eraser crumbly underneath. So if you are noticing that, that's what it is, or your table has like a divot in it, and so it's doing that. So just make sure to have a clean workspace. I clearly did not check mine before I got started. So again, you're just repeating that very same process, doing different layers, more layers, the closer to the center you get. And what should start to happen is your color gets really intense down here in the middle. Okay, and it's much lighter the farther out it goes. So it's really intense color and then it fades out to a lighter color. Okay, if you start to notice you have lines, like I noticed there's a bit of a line right here, all you got to do is take your color pencil and color in a circular motion to kind of get rid of some of those lines. You kind of want to blend it out. So you want it smooth. You don't want to see any harsh lines. Okay. So for now, I'm going to leave this as is. I'm probably going to go back through and add additional layers of red, but I don't need to do that yet because I'm going to blend an additional color into it. So I want you to see right now is it's really intense in the center. And as you go farther and farther out, there's less and less layers, which means it's lighter and lighter. Okay, so we're going to repeat this process over and over again using different colors. So what's important to know is you're wanting it to be the same thing. So you want it to be really intense in the center and it gets lighter the farther out it goes. Now, some students struggle with this because you're mixing the colors into each other. So right here on this edge where my red stops, that's where I want my orange to be the most intense, okay? Which means that I'm going to layer my orange all the way into my red, all the way up to here where it gets really intense. So this is the most intense orange and it's gonna lightly layer up into here. And then I'm gonna have my orange go all the way out here. So it's gonna go up and around and I'll blend my yellow in over here, okay? So in order to do that, I gotta start by doing a light layer of orange. So I have a lot of surface area to take up. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a light layer of orange. Obviously, I have a lot of surface area to cover, so you might finish yours a little bit more quickly than mine. I'm going to pause the video real quick so I can sharpen my pencil and finish giving this guy 2 different layers of color. So give me just a moment. Okay guys, I'm back and I've done 2 layers of my orange. I actually had to sharpen my pencil multiple times. I feel like it's gotten significantly smaller since I last saw you. If you've ever had that problem with colored pencils, it's because the lead inside your pencil is broken. There's nothing usually wrong with your pencil sharpener. It's because the pencil's been used as a drumstick or it's been dropped repeatedly on the floor. So the lead inside the actual pencil is broken, so it's going to keep ripping and falling out. So I think I got a nice tip on mine. And so I did 2 layers. So I took my orange, blended it all the way into my red, did 1 layer all throughout here. And then I went ahead and did a second layer of orange. I'm kind of at this point now, I'm just going to keep layering. You still see most of my paper has been covered. And I'm going to keep layering my colors on top of each other because I want a nice intense color. And this is around the point where you will start to want to see, hey, are these colors transitioning really well, or do I need to do additional layers somewhere? And specifically, do I need to take my other color and work on blending it into my new color? Okay, so you can tell right here, this is where my orange is getting really intense because I'm focusing on doing lots of layers here. Again, you want to make it as smooth as possible. So if there's any area that's looking a little bit rougher, you want to go back and just add some more layers. So sometimes I notice this happens, it's starting with mine where the color right where your 2 colors start to really interlock, it's lighter, and all you got to do is just add some more layers of color. So I'm going to add a little bit of orange into my red. I'm going to start with that one since it's a lighter color. And I happen to already have had it in my hand. Okay. And then I'm going to take my red and blend it back into my orange. Okay, and this is going to change the color and make it blend more smoothly. Okay, so this is a great point. Again, as long as you're doing light layers and you're slowly adding things on top of each other, this is a great opportunity to start looking and see, are there any lines in your artwork? If there are, all you got to do is go over it a couple more times. Okay. So again, I have a pretty big surface area to cover here. Hopefully yours is a little smaller than mine. The larger your area, just the more time it's going to take, which is okay. So I have a really nice smooth transition over here. I'm going to go ahead and start with my yellow. Now, if you've had been paying attention in class, you'll always know that yellow is our special color. You always want to add more yellow than you think you need. You also do not want to be lazy with yellow, especially when you're doing colored pencil and especially when you are on white paper. It is so easy to be lazy with yellow. Don't be lazy. When you think you've done enough layers, go ahead and do 2 additional layers because you can't tell if you've covered all of the paper. It's much harder. Okay, so in a similar breath, I want my most intense yellow to be in this section, right where my orange is getting the lightest. I want to blend my yellow all the way down here into my orange. And I'm going to go ahead and add a ton of yellow up here because I'm going to be blending green into it. And if you've ever tried to blend yellow and green before, you will note it is very challenging and extremely frustrating because yellow gets totally eaten up by green. So I'm going to go ahead and add my layers. So I'm going to go ahead and do 3 layers of my yellow just to get the whole thing covered. I am going to need to sharpen this guy and I will pop back in when that's done. So you can go ahead and pause the video and work on that. Okay guys, I'm back and I've done a couple layers of my yellow into my orange. So I took my yellow, it's really intense up over here, and I blended it all the way down here into my orange. I kind of did a little bit of a loop in this direction. As you can tell, my yellow in the center is really intense and it slowly starts to fade out to a lighter and lighter yellow. I know this is going to be a little harder to show up on your end. Just know, I promise, I did a lot of layers and the closer to the center I get, the more intense that color gets. Now you'll start to notice I do have a line right here where my orange stops. Blending in with my yellow. So all you're going to do again, anytime you see a line, you're going to take that color that's slightly darker and you're going to slowly and carefully layer it into the color. Again, I like to do circular motions. You might not, that's okay. I think circular motions help the most. And the main thing I'm wanting is I want to make sure that I am covering my paper, that it's a smooth transition. There's not like weird lines in different places, that I am taking my time and being intentional. Okay. So I like the way that looks. I'm not gonna mess with it too much. I might go, and add some more yellow here. But I think for what we're trying to do here, this is fine. If there's an area that's bothering you, you can always come back and work on it a little bit more. Like I might add, again, some more orange here after I add my yellow. It's just so much easier to add yellow first, just because it's such a light color before adding your darker colors to it. So I always recommend doing that. So again, I have my yellow, it goes all the way down here and then it starts to fade up here. I'm actually gonna bring my yellow up more just because green dramatically changes yellow, like really dramatically changes it. So I'm actually going to add, again, I'm not going to be lazy with my yellow. I'm going to add more layers than I think I need. I'd rather you have more layers of yellow than not enough, because you can really easily fix too many layers of yellow, but if you don't put enough yellow down, it's really hard to fix it. Okay, So if you haven't caught on to this, so much of this is just paying attention, noticing how you're coloring, slowing down, and being really careful and intentional with how you are choosing to color. So I'm gonna go ahead and rotate my paper, color in that opposite direction so I can get both sides of my paper saturated with my color. And then we move on to our green. So this is going to be our explanation of why we have two greens. Now you could just take this dark forest green and blend it into your yellow, but I will tell you for a matter of fact that many students struggle with that. So I highly recommend getting some sort of lime green color to use before you use your dark green. It just makes it a little bit easier to blend that into your yellow, since green is a cool color and yellow is a warm color. We want to make sure it's a nice smooth transition. We want them to be friends. So we don't want our green to eat too much into our yellow. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a light layer. This green is so nice. It blends really well with my yellow. Again, the more yellowy your green, the better off you'll be. So I'm gonna go ahead, take my green, do a similar thing where I'm adding some layers. And I'm gonna make sure it feeds in nice and smooth to my yellow. Now, because I've had so many layers of my yellow, this is blending really nicely. If it's starting to turn a really dark green, you need to stop right now and go add more yellow before you keep continuing, okay? If it's not this smooth, go add more yellow. Again, it is so much worth your time to add more yellow than you think you need than it is to add too little. It's so hard to fix, guys. Please listen to that. Okay, so this has made a nice smooth transition, okay, to my yellow. So I'm gonna go ahead and where I want that green to be a little bit more intense, I'm gonna cross hatch, just rotating my paper, making my green a little bit greener. Now you don't have to be as like intense with your layering if you're using this light green, because we are gonna layer another green on top of it. We just wanna cover this area where those two colors merge. Okay, so I have that down. Now I'm going to move to my darker green. Very similar process. So I'm going to take those colors. We're going to cross hatch into them. And we're just going to keep layering in a similar way, covering up as much as of our paper as possible and cross hatching. Okay, and again, of course, it's going to be the most intense down here. Another thing you'll notice is the more layers you do, the shorter they should take, because you've already laid down your basic color first. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take my light green and I'm gonna blend it up into my dark green again. Again, making sure that everything is a smooth transition. So anywhere that I'm recreating a line on accident, because maybe I pressed too hard, oops, that was me, just going back over it. It's totally fine, part of the process. Okay, so obviously I need to spend more time blending these greens into each other because they're not wanting to blend very well. And that's because this is a yellow green and then this is a dark green. So this is going to be the biggest area where you guys are struggling. There's one more area that will be a little challenging, but not as hard as these two colors. So really making sure that just taking your time on your yellow and green. And being very, very careful. Okay. So again, rotating my paper in all directions, getting those colors nice and neat. Then I'm going to go ahead and right over here for mine, I'm going to add just a little bit more pressure on this area because for whatever reason, this quality of pencil with this color isn't wanting to blend really well. Okay, now would be a great time as I'm coloring to just mention the quality of colored pencils. You guys will notice this with art supplies. You go to the store and there's like a million brands to choose from. So I'm currently using Crazy Art colored pencils, which are not in the highest tier at all. These are like normal pencils. They're not quite like dollar store colored pencils, but they're also definitely not the highest quality. And just to show you that you can use lower quality materials and still have amazing results. If you're a student who's really interested in art and you love colored pencils, I highly, highly, highly recommend getting a Prisma color pencil set. However, they are incredibly expensive. It's about $1 per pencil. And so, you know, if you're getting a set of 150, that's $150 to fork out. But they are amazing. So if you are using color pencils, you have a color pencil set, you'll notice your colors blend much nicer and easier, and it's a smoother transition. Your colors are much more intense. And that's what you are paying for when you pay for more expensive materials. And that really goes for any art supply material. Typically, the more expensive it is, the higher quality is, and the better it's going to work. But that does not mean that you cannot make amazing artwork with cheaper materials. I do it literally all the time because art supplies, as I mentioned, are and can be crazy expensive. Okay, so I have a much smoother transition here. I could probably work a little bit more on this area, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. I've been working on it for a while. I'm going to go ahead and start with my blue here. Blue is my next color to blend into. And so similar process, I'm going to take my blue. It's going to go all the way up into my green, all the way up here. And it's going to be the most intense in this section down here. And then we're going to fade down. I'm actually going to go ahead and fade all the way down. And I'll add a little bit of violet to that area as well. Depending on what your squiggle looks like, you might have already run out of room, or depending on where you started, that's totally fine. Just kind of continue in the logical sense that the colors go in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and again, I'm just going to do a second layer. And we're just continuing that process. So you want it to go from more intense down here in the center to less intense. I actually forgot to rotate my paper. I'm going to make sure I do that so I can get all the white of my paper. You want to try to get rid of any evidence of the fact that you were coloring this. You want it to be smooth as possible. This really helps us when learning how to blend different things together. Okay, so about here would be when I would look and see and decide if I need more green. I think I do in this area since I've done a couple layers. I'm gonna go ahead and take my green and layer it back down. So again, you want a smooth transition. So anytime your eye kind of stops, or if it's not looking as smooth as you think it should, just go back and add the opposite color, kind of play around with it a little bit. Okay, so again, I'm gonna add some more blue, because that's where I want it to be my darkest. Paying attention not to have any sort of line. Okay, so you want it to be nice and smooth. And then we want it to fade out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of my violet over here in this section so we can get some nice violet colors. It looks like my violet needs to be sharpened a little bit. Okay, so again, I ran out of room, so my violet's going to be here, and it's also going to be up here with our red. Don't forget, we never blended it in with our red. Again, you might have more room at the bottom of yours, so you can do that. It is totally up to you. It's dependent on your shape and how you chose to draw your initial thing. Okay, so I'm just taking my violet, blending it into my blue. Same exact process. So making sure it's nice and smooth. I like to rotate my paper a lot. The farther away from that intense blue, the more intense purple I'm going to have. So The fewer layers of blue, the more carefully I'm layering that violet right on top. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and take my blue and just blend it back into my violet a little bit more, although I'm loving that transition. It looks so much better in person than it does on the dock camera. Unfortunately, sometimes the dock camera doesn't pick up all those colors. Maybe if I zoom in, you can see, but that is a really nice transition. I think it looks really beautiful. I like to talk about when we discuss color in class, everyone kind of has your zone of your color ranges. I love blues and greens. I also love violets. So this is my little happy zone of my colors. So I've gone ahead, I've run out of room. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip a Rooney to my red. And so I have red over here and I'm gonna have violet join into my red since violet and red are also next to each other on the color wheel. But before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and add some more red because I noticed there's not really a ton here. And I really wanna have a nice layer of red down before I add my violet because red is a warm color and violet's a cool color. So I had mentioned earlier that yellow and green were going to be challenging to blend. The other two colors you're going to have a hard time with are going to be red and violet, although you won't have as difficult of a time as you did with green and yellow because they're not as separate from each other, if that makes sense. Like green is such an intense, or it can be such an intense dark color. And yellow is so light, whereas red is much darker than yellow, so it's a little bit easier to blend. Okay, so I'm just adding some extra colors. Not extra colors, sorry, extra red, extra layers of my red. Okay, because I don't want my violet to eat into that too much. Then I'm going to go ahead and carefully add my violet into my red. Make sure you crosshatch, get those colors nice and blended. I'm going to start to go in like a circular motion because it's a kind of a weird shape and on the edge of the paper. So I want to make sure I'm getting all of that. So I like to go in circular motions once you get a basic layer down. Going back to what I was talking about earlier with colored pencils, I recommend if you would like to buy like I call them fancy sets. If you'd like to buy a fancy set of especially like Prisma colored pencils, look around and see if you can find coupons for a particular store. I know here in Arizona, Michael's will often have like 50% off coupons. And so if you have a $150 colored pencil set, you get a 50% off coupon, that's $75 off. So that can be probably the best way to buy things like a set of paints, like acrylic paint, or a really nice set of watercolors. So if you are looking for that, I would always recommend just kind of looking for coupons because you really can save a lot of money that way. Okay, so I've gone ahead, I've added some additional layers. I like the way that looks. I might, pay a little bit more attention when blending my colors a little bit. I start to notice there's a bit of a line, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. Honestly, I think it looks good. You can tell your eye should be able to move through the whole thing without getting stuck anywhere. When I'm looking at this, I might take some more time and focus a little bit more on this area. And then again, over here in this area. But again, I'm not going to worry too much about it right now. This is just practice. If it's bothering you, by all means, please go back and add additional layers. The last thing I will suggest that we can do, you do not have to do this, but some of my students really like to outline this in black just because it gives it a nice, strict outline. It makes it more like emphasized and dramatic, especially if you're deciding to leave the paper white in the background. If you want to be a super rock star, you could blend the black into your colors to make it look three-dimensional, and also kind of play around with doing tints, tones, and shades, which we will get into in another video. We don't need to get into that today. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm just outlining my shape. Again, some of you might have a simple shape like a line and not a ridiculous squiggle that Ms. K decided to draw. But you know, to each their own. People make choices. I made this choice and I'm going to stick with it. I made this idea and I'm going to stick through it to the end. Okay, and going ahead and seeing, I kind of like this sketchy quality to it. So I have some of my lines are kind of falling out and I kind of like it. Again, if you wanted to take your black and blend it in, you could. If you chose to do that, you need to be dangerously careful with your black and yellow because those will, again, black will dramatically change yellow. It's such a simple thing, okay? So that is how you artfully use color pencils. Hopefully the major takeaways you saw is that number one, you can use more simple materials in an epic way to create awesome art. And number two, you can color with color pencils artfully just by doing layers and paying attention to how you color, focusing on all of those different layers. Oh no, there's a glare. But all of those different layers and all of those just carefully, intentionally cross-hatching, going over the same area over and over again. And anytime you have a line, just go over it again with a different color and make sure you're crossing into each other and making sure that you're filling up all of the paper. Alrighty guys, that's it for today for color theory and how to color with colored pencils in an artful way. I will see you all in the next video and thank you for joining me today with Art with Ms. K. All right, bye.